acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, the Darug and the Gundungurra peoples, and on behalf of us all, pay deepest respects to elders past, present and emerging. My name is Mark Greenhill. I'm the Mayor of the City of Blue Mountains, and it's absolutely wonderful to be here today to pay a tribute to someone that meant a lot to all of us, Tim Miers. And I want to acknowledge the family who are here today. I know that the family will be staying back for a family lunch afterwards so that they can have time together as a family to reflect upon the life of a remarkable person. So I acknowledge all of you today and thank you very much, not just for being here, but also for giving us your loved one, Tim, because he meant an awful lot to this community. I was first elected in 1999 to council, and straight after I was elected I held a community outreach morning tea up at the Blaxland Neighbourhood Centre, and one of the first people to come and see me was Tim Miers, and that started a friendship that lasted from that time until the end of his life. Tim was obviously a major moving force behind the Glenbrook Historical Society and so many other things. And what he did on that day was he started to fill me in on the history of Glenbrook, an area I've just been elected to represent, a history that I didn't know, and a history in which he was deeply steeped. But Tim's involvement in the community went way beyond just the Historical Society, as significant as it was, and there's a museum over here now due to the efforts of people like Tim, many of whom are here in the audience today, and I pay tribute to them. But Tim was involved in a whole lot of other important organisations in our community. Some of those are represented here today. Tim was, of course, a fiery. He was very involved in the Scouts movement. He was someone who turned his hand to many parts of community life here in the Blue Mountains. When we dedicate this bench to Tim today, what we're doing is acknowledging an important life, celebrating that life, and ensuring that Tim's presence is always here among us. Something Tim loved to do was to sit and watch. He used to love to sit and watch Glenbrook, a place he loved more than anywhere else in the world. He used to like to sit and watch the world go by. He used to like to sit and watch new faces and faces he knew well in the crowd in his community. So forevermore, I'd like to think that Tim's with us, always watching. Here at this bench, when we come past, we'll remember Tim's presence in our community and in our lives. I think it's a good time to ask Judy to come forward and say a few words.
Thanks, Mark. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for coming today to help celebrate Uncle Tim's life and dedicate this park bench in honour of his memory. Unfortunately, when Uncle Tim passed away in COVID, only 10 people were allowed to attend his funeral. So we made the decision as a family to have a memorable place to remember Uncle Tim. So here we are today. I made contact with our wonderful Mayor Mark Greenhill, who was only too happy to make this happen. He put me in touch with Daniel Long, Head of Parks and Recreation, and he and his team were only too happy to help and were a pleasure to work with. Together as our sister-in-law Robin, when we arrived in this spot, looked at it and said, if we put it here and look this way, Uncle Tim's house points that way. So we thought, oh, well, that's great. And also, he can sit and watch, everybody can sit and watch the traffic go by, which is what he did from his front veranda. So when you pass by and walk through the park, stop, sit, catch your breath and remember Uncle Tim. Oh, sorry, all right. So Mark thought it might be nice just to read Uncle Tim's eulogy from his funeral. It's not too long. So Timothy Alistair Miers, known to many as Timmy, Uncle Tim, Pop, Tim, Uncle Timmy, Tim, Pop and Uncle Tim was born in Rockdale, New South Wales on the 3rd of October in 1929. His parents Arthur Shipton Miers and Madge Priscilla Miers had 4 children, Betty, Peter, Timothy and Judith, who is here today. Put your hand up, Auntie Jude. Auntie Judy will be 92 in July. She's the surviving sibling. Tim never married or had any children of his own, but he had 11 nieces and nephews: Desley, Paul, Glenn, Judy, Timmy, Shelley, Brett, Peter, Wendy, Tony and Susan. Tim moved to Glenbrook in 1933 to 25 Cowdrey Street when he was 4 years old and lived in that same house till he passed, nearly 88 years. When his older brother Peter died, at the age of 8 from diphtheria, Tim barely spoke for a whole year. He was so traumatised by his brother's death. They were like twins, being only 1 year apart and were inseparable. Tim went to Glenbrook Infant School and then to Penrith High. As a young boy, he always wanted to be a motor mechanic and would often go to the Glenbrook garage. His first car, which was a Chevy Ute, was his pride and joy. He left school at the age of 14 as his father needed him to work in the family suitcase business at Chippendale. He would catch the steam train from Glenbrook to Central, then walk to the factory. In 1958, his father died and Tim took over management of the business, which caused him much stress and anxiety. The business was eventually sold and then Tim commenced work as a sheet metal worker at Stramit Industries at Warragamba, where he worked until he retired in February 1995. In his retirement, he loved spending time at his caravan park at Anna Bay on the mid-north coast. He loved bushwalking and always enjoyed to walk from his caravan through the bush to the beach. He led many people on bushwalks through the Glenbrook National Park. Uncle Tim was a train buff. He had a large collection of model trains and loved to set them all up on the big board, complete with the train tracks, trees, houses, petrol garage and animals. It was a complete village. We used to love playing with the trains and we used to get Uncle Tim to set them up. Then he would leave the room, probably to make a cup of tea, and we would speed up the trains and derail them. Much to his disgust, he'd come in. But each time he'd set them up again and do it again for us. Uncle Tim was a prankster and he used to love chasing us kids through the house with his dentures. So all of you knew Uncle Tim's house. He has 4 doors opening out onto the veranda. So us and often our cousins, the Berries, when they would come up, we'd play this chasing game. So we'd go through the house and we never knew where Uncle Tim was lurking and stalking. So we'd come out and he'd catch us with his big, grab us and he'd throw us over his lap and give us one of his famous knee twigs. It was like this. And we'd laugh and roar, we'd nearly cry, but we'd go back for more and more. That was a really good fun thing to remember from Uncle Tim. He didn't mind dressing up. He would always be Santa at our family Christmas, and on one occasion he dressed up as a bride at the Odd Fashion Parade in the Back to the Glenbrook 1999. His dear friend Joan Beard said it was hilarious. He loved animals, he talked to animals in his funny voice, and would always feed the many species of birds that flew onto his veranda. He was so sad when his much-loved Cocker Spaniel Scampy was bitten by a death adder on the track to the Blue Pool. He ran all the way home with Scampy in his arms trying to save him, but sadly he died. We lived in the house next door to Uncle Tim until we either married or left home. He was a very dear member of our family. As we grew up, of course, needed to use a telephone. Our dad wouldn't pay to have the phone connected because Uncle Tim had one. So Uncle Tim had a coin jar, so we would go over and pay for the calls that we would make. But Uncle Tim was constantly yelling from his veranda, "Phone call for you!" The phone calls were never for Uncle Tim, they were for his nieces and nephews. Tim was a member of the Boy Scout movement for many years, and today we've got some of the Scouts here, which is wonderful. And we've also got Ray Rawson, who was Kanga when Uncle Tim was Skip. Ray was Kanga with Uncle Tim, and he's come out today to be here. So I think this is great. Made a great effort to be here with us today. He was also a member of the Boy Scouts. He was a leader with Ray Rawson, and their 40-strong group attended jamborees everywhere, and many of the boys went on to become Queen Scouts. Tim was also very involved with the Rural Fire Brigade as a captain for 10 years, and for many wonderful mateships which lasted a lifetime, and some of those guys are here today, which is just wonderful. Tim helped form the Glenbrook District Historical Society and became the first president in 1994, a position he held for 16 years. He received the Citizens Award from Rotary in 2015. You would always find Tim sitting in the Historical Museum at Glenbrook Infant School on Market Day, so proud to share all his historical knowledge with you. He would shock many people when he told them of the story of the murder many years ago. On one of his historical walks around Glenbrook, they took people to the murder site, which is known as Captain Llewellyn's grave. It was located off one of the fire trails. I also want to say that two of Uncle Tim's very dear neighbours are here, the Parslow family, that lived next door to the Miers family forever, didn't they? And Gay and Bev are here today, and Noel Priestley's here, and other neighbours, newer, younger neighbours, but the neighbourhood we lived in, which was old-time neighbourhoods, everybody got on, everybody looked out for each other, and everybody did till the end. So in recent years, when he found it difficult to walk around unaided, Tim would always sit on his veranda trying to soak up as much sun as he could. People walking by would see him sitting in the chair on the veranda, either wave or call out. And sometimes we'd be down there and you'd see him wave and say, "You don't know them, Uncle Tim." He'd go, "Yes, I do," and he's looking. He just did it. He just did it. It was his favourite place, and he spent most of the day sitting there. He loved seeing everybody go by and knew exactly what was going on. So there's many stories we could tell and share with you, and I'm sure you all have them too. But Uncle Tim we're forever grateful for having him in part as our family and remembering all the good times we had with him. He had a long and happy life and died peacefully in his sleep. Thank you.
Before I call Dennis up to say a few words, there's a connection, I guess, that I have with Tim that goes beyond just knowing him in my formal role. And that is one of my daughters who's here today was one of the nurses with him late in his life, in the last days of his life. So that connection is something that will sit, and there's I think something amazing about Tim's sister being here, who was with him in the early days of his life, and having people here present who are with him in the last days of his life. So there's a continuity here of people who knew and were connected to Tim, and I think that's rather wonderful. Can I ask Dennis Bainbridge to come forward and say a few words?
Thank you, Mark. I had a few things to say, but Judy stole my thunder and she's virtually said everything I'm going to say. But what I'll do is I'll try and fill in a few of the blank spots that Judy didn't cover. We all heard how Tim arrived up here in the early days, the 1930s, in his schooling. Okay. And of course, as he grew up, in the early 1940s, there was a group operating in the School of Arts called the Merrymakers. It was a local concert group, and they were pretty good. When you read all the Gazette stuff, their concerts were very highly praised. Tim was only young, but he was a worker behind the scenes, moving the stage equipment around and operating the curtains. Glenn Rowe, who used to run the thing virtually, was very appreciative of Tim's efforts. In fact, she wrote to him for many years after she moved to Washington. Of course, we all remember in January 1941, when the Abro-Anson crashed in Clifton Avenue and the corner of Liverpool Road. Pam was up the end of the streets, went over her head. Tim knew about it, and so he worked out the track of the aeroplane, so he went and followed all the wreckage where when the port wing fell off, bits were flying off. Tim actually rescued a section of the wing, took it home. It was under the house for many years, but a pest exterminator came along and told Tim's father to put it to track white ants, so his father burned it. Of course, Tim was a young fellow when the mustard gas started arriving in Glenbrook. Being living where they are in Cowdery Street, he could see the siding, and all this drums of stuff are being unloaded and put on trucks. And of course, they're coming up through Raymond Street. Some of the drums fell off, which caused a major stir. There was a massive clean-up, so everybody in Glenbrook knew that mustard gas was going into the Gladstone tunnel. Tim often talked about the place, especially the savage dogs he had. He said they'd take the hand off if anyone near them. And so you heard that age 13 he joined the Bush Fire Brigade Volunteers, set up by George Bunyan in 1942. His knowledge of the bush around here was a valuable asset to all these people. Tim knew the bush very well. Of course, George Bunyan was also asked at times to search for lost people in the mountains, and of course they always called on Tim to come along and help them because he knew where to go and where to look. I think Joan might have told him one time he found a deceased person, which must be pretty tough to lad of that age. We heard about his scouts, how he was the first Glenbrook, and how he operated and handed over to our good friend Ray in the 1960s. Tim was known as Skip. Of course, I think a lot of male scoutmasters were called Skip, but it's a common term. I think yours was Kango, right? Right. Okay. We heard about his service with the Bush Fire Brigade. He was also a member of the St Peter's Anglican Church. He was a church warden, the rector's warden, and he was heavily involved in the fundraising when they were raising money to build the aid frame building. Of completed in 1967. Now, there was a committee formed in 1979 to plan the first centenary of the Glenbrook Public School centenary in 1992. So a group was formed to set up and organise it. Part of this was to organise information, find lost residents, put together the history of Glenbrook. All this work came to good thing because in 1993 they decided to form the Glenbrook District Historical Society, and a lot of the original members are here today. There they are. Okay, Tim was the first president up in 2010, which is a long time for anybody to be president of an organisation and still maintain interest. He set up the Historical Walks program. Now this is a great program where we take people around and show them historical sites around Glenbrook and the immediate area. Tim conducted these walks until we handed it over to Doug Knowles, and the program is still running today. In fact, it's one of our most successful projects. Tim always assisted Doug on, he used to come along and make it, so he was when we finished the walk, Tim would be there with the team and off already. But unfortunately, his health failed towards the end and he couldn't do it anymore. As Judy mentioned, Tim didn't mind dressing up in the event. And the classic pictures we have in the collection of Tim in various, including Joan and a few other people. Glenbrook was a different place in those days, and more social than what it is today. Dressing up appeared to be quite a common thing. Seeing Tim dressed as a bride in Judy mentioned the Lee Weller gravesite. Tim and the family took a very active interest in the gravesite and maintained it for many years. When relatives of the local relatives, who's from Queensland, back at Lee Weller, found out, they came down and the society took them down to the gravesite and handed Tim a certificate of appreciation for all the work he did in maintaining the gravesite. Okay, when we opened our museum in 2014, much of Tim's collection found a home there. Tim was an avid collector of newspaper cuttings. He used to write history on bits of paper, and they're still there in his writing. He's completed the same subject about 4 times, and he always write it out. So he was always researching. So we've got a pile of stuff there, we're still going through it. In fact, there's a box of old newspapers. We haven't collected old newspapers. Tim's passing was a blow to Glenbrook in our society, and the link he provided to our story here. He was sadly missed by all of us.
Thanks, Dennis.
Now, before we close, I was wondering if I could ask Tim's sister to come and help me cut the ribbon, or should I do it on your behalf?
Yeah. She wants you to do it, Mark.
All right. So you've assigned me to do this, have you? Then on your command, I will. Thank you. All right. So, Judy, you want to
Just do both of them, Mark.
All right. Well,
Smile at Shelley.
You ready?
Dennis.
All right. For the enjoyment of the whole community, and in memory of a really special person loved by us all, I declare Tim's bench open. 1, 2. Have a lovely afternoon. As I say, the family are going to stay back and spend some time together over lunch. But for everybody else, thank you for coming and celebrating Tim's life. And to the family, my deepest condolences and the love of the whole community to you. This is, with COVID, it wasn't the sort of memorial for Tim that we would like to have had. So in a way today fills in for that. So on behalf of the entire community of the Blue Mountains, to Tim's family, can I extend our love and best wishes to you in this time. And I hope that this afternoon you'll have really good reflection together and a lot of love and celebration for a really terrific human being. Thank you very much.
Good. Thanks, Mark. Hey, no, you're good. Excellent. Thank you. Yeah. Sure. What about Dennis's photo? No. Just one item. Yeah, but
Roll two separate stores, two different areas, and now they're